Hi everyone, I just got done editing my video. Oh, you can see my husband out there shoveling snow. I just got done editing the video and I realized I hadn't filmed greetings. So, hi. I wanted to share with you the way that I frame my pastels. There's a few different ways to do it. I think every artist has their favorite way of framing, and there's pros and cons to each method. This is just the way that I do it. So it may not work for everyone, it may not work for you, but I know there's a lot of questions around there, so I wanted to share my technique. But thank you for tuning in. As always, you can join me on Patreon if you wanted to see more videos like this and my full-length tutorials. But otherwise, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. Every share and like always helps the algorithm and helps people find me. So again, thanks for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. See you next time. So I put a piece of glassine paper down on my work table and then make sure there's no pastel dust on it. I then take a little piece of acid-free tape, lay it on the back of the painting, sticky side up, so I can position my mat exactly where it needs to be. Once it's there, I press it onto that little piece of tape and then I flip it over. And I always try to keep the painting top side away from me, just to be consistent. And then I cut pieces of that same tape and I tape the painting to the mat. I always use a scissors because I like having a neat finish. I am using removable archival tape. This is similar to what you would use if you were a watercolorist. This is also the tape I use to tape my papers to my easel. It's, like I said, it's easy to remove. So if somebody wanted to change out the mat, this would not be an issue. I always tape the short side first, then a long side, then a short side, and then the other long side. I go in a circle. And if the paper's warped at all, you can see me kind of pressing lightly on the paper there, and that's just to flatten it out and make sure it doesn't have any curve in it when I'm taping it down. But I find when I do it this way, I get much flatter results than if I do opposite sides. I also press the tape from the center to the edge. And then while I have it flipped over, I write the name of the painting, the year, and I sign my name on the back. So even though my initials are on the front, I also like to have my signature on the back. And then carefully flip it back over. Now I am inspecting the mat and making sure that there are no little tiny bits of pastel that fell off the painting and got onto the mat. So I use a gum rubber eraser to pick up any pastel that's there. And then if there are still some visible marks like there are on this mat, I'll take a damp paper towel, very, very damp, and just gently rub that pastel away. So now I am getting the frame ready. I always clean the inside glass before I put the painting down, make sure there's no hairs or dust. Make sure the glass is completely dry. And then I will lay the painting in on top of the glass. And I pick it up and flip it over and make sure that there's nothing that shouldn't be in there. Because sometimes when you lay the painting down, you'll knock a little piece of pastel down, or you'll catch a dog hair or something in there between the painting and the glass. So I always check. Now I am attaching the back. This is just a commercially available frame. I always use acid-free frames with acid-free backers. And then the glass that I use is UV70 glass. It is non-glare and also has UV protection. And I can put links to these things in the description. But then I clean off the glass again, flip it back over, and now I'm measuring my paper. And this is just kind of a nice way to finish the back, is I just put a paper covering on it. You don't have to do this step, but I like to. So I'm just going through making sure those tabs are pressed all the way down. And now I am adhering double-sided tape along the inside edge of the frame. This tape is a 1/4 inch wide, and my frame itself is just under 1 inch wide. So the frame isn't very thick. So that's why I'm using this thin tape. But I do this around all 4 sides, making sure it's pressed down nice and tight. And again, I just use the scissors to cut it so that I have a nice finished edge. Now to put the paper on, one trick I've learned is to have it so it curls downward. If it's curling upward, it might leave wrinkles. So I just flatten it out. I use my drill and my ruler there. And then I lay the frame down. It's got all that double-sided tape, so the paper will stick to it. And then I'm just pressing it down just to get it stuck on there. And then when I flip it over, I press it down again, and the second time I'm doing it quite hard. I really want that to stick. And I'm also using this to kind of crease the edges of the paper so I can see where the frame edges are. And now I'm using a little trimmer tool to trim off the excess paper, and I will put a link for this in the description as well. This is so slick. It just cuts off this extra paper like nothing. I have seen some people who will spray the back of these with water to get rid of that loose paper that's kind of in the middle there. It's not like pulled super, super tight. I don't do that, but you can try that if you want to. I've tried it a few times. I don't think it does much. So I just leave it like this. And then I just gently pop off the little paper that is left. And now I close the edges and finish them off with black acid-free tape. And I think if I was doing a lighter frame, I would probably use white paper or craft paper and then a lighter tape. But since I'm framing in black, everything that I'm doing here is with a black tape. But I will do all 4 edges with this black masking tape to give it a really nice finished look on the back. And then I flip it over just to make sure I still have the right side up before I put my wire on. So I'm measuring about 1/3 of the way down from the top. And I'm drilling little pilot holes for my screws. You got to be very careful you don't go all the way through to the front of the frame. You only have to go in a tiny bit just to start the hole. And then here are my hangers that I'm attaching. I screw those into the hole, and I have them at about I don't know, 25 to 30 degree angle maybe. They don't point straight up and they don't point towards the center of the painting. I just have them just on a really slight angle because the wire, when I put the wire on, I don't put my wire on super, super tight. I like to give it a little bit of wiggle room. So I angle my brackets so that the wire isn't pulling on them at a strange angle. And then here's the wire. I just use a twisted wire. For my heavier paintings, I'll use a thicker gauge that is coated in like plastic coated wire. But for my light paintings, I just use just a plain twisted wire. I measure it to be about 1.5 times the width of the painting, so I have enough left over to wrap. So I put it through the ring, and I put it through twice, and then I cross it over on itself and wrap about an inch up and then go back down towards the bracket with the tail to use up the rest of that. And then I make sure that the sharp ends are pinched really, really tightly to the wrapped wire. And then I come across to the other side. This is where I kind of measure how long I want that wire to be. And then I do the same thing on this side. I wrap it around and I will trim off any extra that that I have. A couple inch or an inch or two. I try to do this so I don't waste a lot of wire. Then I pinch that tail end down just like I did on the other side. And now I'm just going to cut off about 1.5 inches of the black tape, and I wrap that around the wire where that sharp end is. And it wraps around maybe 4 times, and then I squeeze it on real tight so that the tape stays in place. But that protects your fingers from those sharp points of the wires. So when you're handling it, you don't poke yourself, and when you're hanging it, you don't scratch anything. And then the last thing I do is I add these clear rubber bumpers to the bottom corners, and this will help it to hang straight. So I hope this was useful, and I'll see you next time.